Hello and welcome back to Hollywood Quest. Today we journey into the world of such a woman whose name became a whisper, a legend in the salons of Paris and the penthouses of New York, a woman who was not born to greatness, but sculpted herself into its very image. Her name was Mona von Bismarck, but for decades the world knew her by a single definitive title, the best-dressed woman in the world. This isn't just a story about fashion, though the clothes are breathtaking. It's a story about ambition, reinvention, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. It's a Gilded Age fable that stretches into the modern era, following a young woman from the dusty horse tracks of Kentucky to the sun-drenched shores of a private Italian island. But it's also a cautionary tale. A story that asks what happens when the applause fades, when the designers pack up their patterns, and when a life built on a flawless public image is forced to confront the quiet, unadorned solitude of its final years. This is the spectacular and ultimately heartbreaking story of Mona von Bismarck. To understand how a girl from Louisville, Kentucky could conquer the world of international high society, we must first immerse ourselves in the era that made her possible. The late 19th and early 20th centuries in America were a period of explosive change, a time that author Mark Twain cynically dubbed the Gilded Age. It was an era of stark contradictions. Unprecedented industrial fortunes were being forged by men who became titans of steel, railways, and finance. The Carnegies, the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers. Their wealth was staggering, almost beyond comprehension, and it fueled a level of opulence that rivaled the royal courts of Europe. Yet, this glittering new money was often looked down upon by the established old money aristocracy of the East Coast, families who could trace their lineage and wealth back for generations. For the newly minted millionaires and their families, acceptance into these hallowed circles was the ultimate prize. It wasn't enough to be rich. One had to have the right pedigree, the right manners, and live in the right houses. This social crucible created a unique pressure, especially for women. A beautiful and ambitious woman, even from a modest background, could potentially ascend this ladder through a strategic marriage. Marriage was for many the single most important career move a woman could make. This was the American landscape. Across the Atlantic, Europe was a different world. It was a continent of ancient titles, crumbling monarchies, and a deep-seated reverence for history and lineage. For wealthy Americans, Europe was both a cultural shopping ground, where they could buy art, antiques, and even entire castles, and a social frontier. Marrying an American heiress with a vast fortune could save a debt-ridden European aristocrat's estate, and in return, the American woman would gain something money alone couldn't buy, a title. She could become a duchess, a countess, a princess. This transatlantic exchange of money for titles became a defining feature of the era. Into this world of rigid social codes and boundless ambition, Mona Travis Strader was born in 1897. Her origins were a world away from the society she would one day dominate. Louisville, Kentucky, was a city steeped in the traditions of the American South, known for its bourbon and its horse racing. Mona's father, Robert Sims Strader, was a horse trainer. Her mother, Bertie O'Shaughnessy, was a beautiful woman, but the family was far from wealthy. Their life was comfortable, but it was not the life of the elite. When Mona was just a young girl, her parents' marriage dissolved. This was a significant event at a time when divorce was still relatively uncommon and carried a social stigma. Mona and her brother were sent to live with their paternal grandmother in Lexington, the heart of Kentucky's horse country. It was here, surrounded by the culture of thoroughbreds and the wealthy families who owned them, that Mona likely had her first taste of a grander world. She was a strikingly beautiful child with piercing blue eyes that would become one of her most famous features. And she was smart. She observed the dynamics of the society around her, understanding perhaps instinctively the power that beauty, charm, and the right connections could wield. Her formal education was limited, but she was receiving an education of a different kind, a master class in the art of social navigation. Mona's ambition was not just a vague yearning, it was a focused, driving force. She knew her beauty was her primary asset, her passport out of a conventional life. Her first major step came in 1917, when, at the age of 20, she married Henry J. Schlesinger. He was a man of considerable means, an iron ore heir and prominent racehorse owner from Wisconsin, and he was 28 years her senior. This marriage was Mona's entry ticket. It lifted her out of Kentucky and placed her into a world of wealth and leisure. Though the marriage would only last a few years, it was a crucial apprenticeship. She learned how to manage a household, how to entertain, how to dress, and how to carry herself among the wealthy. She was a quick study, shedding any remnants of her provincial background and polishing herself into a sophisticated young woman. After their divorce, Mona received a generous settlement. She was now a woman of independent, though not vast, means. She moved to New York City, the epicenter of American social life. It was the Roaring Twenties, a decade of jazz flappers and dizzying financial speculation. Here, she entered a new phase. In 1921, she married again, this time to a prominent banker named James Irving Bush. He was known as the handsomest man in America, and their union placed Mona firmly within the glamorous, fast-paced world of New York's elite. Once again, the marriage was to an older, established man. With Bush, Mona's social education continued. She honed her style, cultivated friendships with influential people, and solidified her reputation as one of the city's most beautiful and elegant women. But Mona was destined for a far grander stage. The second marriage, like the first, eventually ended. By the mid-1920s, she was divorced for a second time, a status that could have been socially ruinous for another woman. But Mona possessed a unique combination of beauty, intelligence, and an almost steely resolve. She was not just surviving. She was positioning herself for her next and most spectacular ascent. The single event that transformed Mona Strader from a well-known socialite into an icon of legendary status was her third marriage in 1926. Her husband was Harrison Williams, a man who wasn't just rich, but was widely considered to be the wealthiest man in America. A widower and 24 years her senior, Williams was a financial genius who had built a colossal empire of public utility companies. His fortune, estimated at the time to be around $600 million, the equivalent of many billions in today's currency, was almost impossible to fathom. Marrying Harrison Williams was like being crowned queen. Suddenly, Mona had access to limitless resources. The life they built together was a spectacle of Gilded Age extravagance. They owned a portfolio of magnificent homes, each one a perfectly curated stage for their lives. There was their monumental neo-Georgian townhouse on Fifth Avenue in New York, designed by the famed architect Delano and Aldrich. It was so grand that the ballroom alone took up an entire floor. They had a sprawling waterfront estate on Long Island, a verdant playground for the summer months. In the winters, they decamped to their palatial villa in Palm Beach, Florida, a masterpiece of indoor-outdoor living designed by architect Maurice Fatio. They also maintained a chic apartment in Paris for when they attended the couture shows. And then there was Il Fortino. This was their villa on the sun-drenched rocky island of Capri in Italy. Perched on a cliff overlooking the impossibly blue waters of the Tyrrhenian Sea, this property would become Mona's soul sanctuary, the place she loved more than any other. She poured her heart and her husband's fortune into it, particularly its gardens, which we will return to later. With this backdrop of immense wealth, Mona began to perfect the art form that would make her famous, her style. She became a devoted client of the Parisian haute couture houses. For Mona, fashion was not a frivolous pastime, it was a serious artistic pursuit. She didn't follow trends. She cultivated a relationship with clothes that was about absolute perfection of cut, fabric, and fit. Her patronage was so extensive that it was said she would order entire collections at a time. She had a particular affinity for certain designers, but her most profound and enduring relationship was with the Spanish couturier, Cristobal Balenciaga. Balenciaga was a designer's designer, a man revered for his sculptural, almost architectural approach to clothing. He was a notorious perfectionist, intensely private, and utterly uncompromising in his vision. In Mona, he found his ideal client, a woman who not only had the perfect figure to display his creations, but also possessed the innate understanding of elegance and the discipline to wear his clothes exactly as he intended. Their relationship was more than a commercial one. It was a deep, symbiotic friendship built on mutual respect and a shared aesthetic. Mona became his muse. He designed specifically for her, and she in turn was fiercely loyal. It was said that in her later years, she wore almost nothing but Balenciaga. This devotion was a testament to the perfect harmony between the creator and his ideal wearer. In 1933, this dedication to style was officially recognized in the most spectacular way imaginable. A syndicate of the top Parisian designers, including giants like Coco Chanel, Madeleine Vionnet, Edward Molyneux, and Jean Lanvin, came together to vote on a single crucial question: who was the best-dressed woman in the world? Their choice was unanimous. It was the American socialite, Mrs. Harrison Williams. Mona was the very first person to be given this title, and it stuck with her for the rest of her life. What made her style so captivating? It was a study in controlled elegance. She was famous for her signature platinum white hair, always perfectly coiffed, and her piercing sapphire blue eyes. She favored clean lines, monochromatic color palettes, often shades of gray, beige, and her signature Bismarck blue, and minimal but important jewelry. One of her most famous assets were her magnificent pearls. She was never ostentatious. There was a severity and a purity to her look. As her friend and photographer Cecil Beaton noted, there was something granite-like about her beauty. She projected an image of untouchable, flawless perfection. Her life was a testament to this control. She was known for her rigorous diet and exercise routines, maintaining her slender figure well into her later years. She was crafting not just a wardrobe, but an entire persona. When Harrison Williams passed away in 1953, he left Mona an immense fortune, making her one of the wealthiest women in the world. She was in her mid-50s, still beautiful, and now entirely in control of her own destiny. 2 years later, in 1955, she married for a fifth and final time. Her choice of husband was telling. He was Count Albrecht von Bismarck-Schönhausen, a German aristocrat, and the grandson of the legendary Iron Chancellor, Otto von Bismarck. This marriage was different. It wasn't about money. Mona already had more than she could ever spend. It was about securing the one thing her American wealth couldn't buy her outright, a noble European title. By marrying the Count, Mona Travis Strader from Kentucky finally became the Countess von Bismarck. It was the final crowning achievement in her long social ascent. They divided their time between Paris and her beloved villa in Capri, living a life of quiet, aristocratic elegance. While Mona's public life was a dazzling performance of fashion and high society, Her private world revealed a woman of surprising depth and passion. The most telling example of this was her profound lifelong love for gardening. This wasn't the casual hobby of a wealthy woman with a team of gardeners at her disposal. It was a deep, almost obsessive devotion. At her villa in Capri il Fortino, she became a master horticulturist. She terraced the steep cliffsides, creating a series of breathtaking gardens that cascaded down towards the sea. She was a hands-on gardener, spending hours each day in the dirt, tending to her plants. Friends recalled seeing this icon of high fashion, dressed in simple work clothes, her hands covered in soil, completely absorbed in her work. She was incredibly knowledgeable, corresponding with botanical gardens and plant experts around the world, constantly seeking out new and rare specimens to add to her collection. The gardens were her canvas, a place where she could exert a different kind of control, not over her public image, but over the wild beauty of nature itself. It was a world away from the fitting rooms of Balenciaga, yet it demanded the same patience, vision, and pursuit of perfection. This juxtaposition is one of the most fascinating aspects of her character. She commissioned her simple gardening shorts from the same couturiers who made her ball gowns. The legendary Hubert de Givenchy recalled designing special, highly functional, yet elegant work clothes for her. This small detail speaks volumes. Even in her most private, earthy pursuits, the standard of perfection had to be met. The garden was her escape, but it was also another expression of her impeccable, highly disciplined aesthetic. It revealed a side of her that was creative, patient, and deeply connected to something more elemental than the social whirl. Her friendship with Cristobal Balenciaga was another cornerstone of her emotional life. It was a bond that went far beyond clothes. They were both intensely private, demanding individuals who shared a reverence for artistry and discipline. They understood each other. When Balenciaga made the shocking decision to abruptly close his couture house in 1968, stating that there is no one left to dress, Mona was reportedly shattered. The story, now a fashion legend, is that she locked herself in her room at Il Fortino for 3 days and refused to see anyone. She wasn't just mourning the loss of her favorite designer. She was mourning the end of an era and the loss of a kindred spirit. Balenciaga had been the chief architect of her public identity. His closure felt like a personal betrayal of the world of beauty and perfection they had built together. These personal stories humanize a figure who could otherwise seem cold and remote. They show us a woman who craved beauty not just in the objects she owned, but in the world she created around her. They reveal the emotional core beneath the granite-like exterior that Cecil Beaton observed. Her loyalty to Balenciaga, her passion for her gardens, these were the things that truly mattered to her, far more than the fleeting praise of society columns. No life of such immense public scrutiny is without its complexities and controversies. The most persistent critique leveled against Mona was that she was the ultimate social climber, a woman who ruthlessly used her beauty in a series of strategic marriages to acquire wealth and status. From this perspective, her life was a calculated campaign, with each husband representing a deliberate step up the social and financial ladder. There is certainly evidence to support this view. Her marriages were almost all to significantly older men of immense wealth and influence. Her final marriage to Count von Bismarck seemed to many a transparent move to acquire a title. However, to simply label her a gold digger is to apply a modern, perhaps overly simplistic judgment to the choices available to a woman of her time. In the early 20th century, marriage was the primary vehicle for a woman's social and economic advancement. Mona was born with 2 great gifts: extraordinary beauty and a sharp intelligence. Was it controversial to use those assets to escape a provincial life and achieve security and influence? Or was she simply playing the game and playing it better than anyone else? This remains a point of historical debate. She was not a passive beauty waiting to be discovered. She was an active agent in her own destiny, a brilliant strategist who understood the rules of society and used them to her ultimate advantage. Another point of quiet debate surrounds her personality. To the public, she presented an image of cool, aloof perfection. She was often described as remote, reserved, and impeccably controlled. In an era before celebrity oversharing, she maintained an aura of mystery. But was this her true nature, or was it a carefully constructed shield? Anecdotes from close friends paint a slightly different picture. They speak of a woman with a dry wit, fierce loyalties, and a deep, if rarely shown, emotional capacity. Her profound grief over Balenciaga's retirement and her all-consuming passion for her garden suggest a rich inner life that was deliberately kept hidden from the public gaze. The historical record is left with this fascinating contradiction: the icy public goddess versus the private woman who found her greatest joy with her hands in the earth. Perhaps the truest interpretation is that both were real. She was a woman of immense self-discipline who channeled her passions into controlled aesthetic pursuits, be it fashion or horticulture, and who built a formidable wall around her private self. The world Mona had so expertly conquered began to crumble in her later years. The death of her final husband, Count von Bismarck, in a car accident in 1970 was a profound blow. This loss, coupled with the earlier closure of Balenciaga's atelier, seemed to sever her remaining ties to the grand social life she had once led. The world itself was changing. The rigid, formal society she had known was giving way to the cultural revolutions of the 1960s and 70s. The era of the great couture client was fading. Mona chose to retreat. She withdrew almost completely from public life, spending her final years in near total seclusion at her beloved villa in Capri. The once glamorous hostess now rarely entertained. Her world shrank to the confines of Il Fortino and its magnificent gardens. The gardens, which had always been her sanctuary, now became her entire existence. She spent her days there, a solitary figure moving among the flowers and trees she had so lovingly cultivated. There is an almost tragic poignancy to these final years. The woman who had been photographed, celebrated, and emulated by millions was now profoundly alone. The glittering parties, the couture fittings, the international travel, all of it belonged to the past. What remained was an elderly woman surrounded by immense beauty of her own making, but living in a silent world filled with memories. Her life, which had been such a public spectacle, ended in the most private and insular way imaginable. Mona von Bismarck died in 1983 at the age of 86. Her legacy is complex. On the surface, she is remembered as one of the 20th century's greatest style icons. Her influence was not about starting trends, but about embodying an ideal of timeless, architectural elegance. She represents the zenith of haute couture, a time when fashion was an exclusive art form created by masters for a handful of dedicated patrons. She demonstrated that style was not just about clothes, but about discipline, poise, and the creation of a total, unwavering aesthetic. Beyond fashion, her life story is a powerful, almost archetypal American narrative of self-invention. She is a testament to the idea that in a society in flux, one can transcend the circumstances of one's birth through sheer force of will. She crafted her own identity, piece by meticulous piece, and in doing so, achieved a level of global recognition that was extraordinary for any woman of her time. But perhaps her most lasting and tangible legacy is one she planned herself. In her will, she left her Parisian townhouse and a significant portion of her fortune to establish the Mona Bismarck Foundation, now known as the American Center for Art and Culture. It was a final remarkable act of self-definition. The woman who had spent her life collecting beautiful things and perfecting her own image chose to be remembered as a patron of the arts, creating a bridge between the American culture she came from and the Parisian culture she had so enthusiastically embraced. It was a way of ensuring her name would be associated not just with dresses and jewels, but with the enduring power of art and creativity. So, we return to that old black and white photograph. We see the perfect poise, the flawless gown, the enigmatic gaze. But now we see so much more. We see the Kentucky girl with big dreams. We see the shrewd social navigator, the devoted friend, the passionate gardener. We see the dazzling pinnacle of a lost world of elegance and the quiet solitude of its aftermath. Mona von Bismarck's life was a masterpiece of construction. She built it with the same care and precision that Balenciaga used to cut a gown or that she herself used to plan a garden path. It was a life of breathtaking beauty, staggering ambition, and profound contradictions. It serves as a glittering yet solemn reminder that the most public lives often harbor the most private sorrows, and that even for the woman who has everything, the universal human experiences of love, loss, and loneliness are inescapable. Her story lingers, not just as a footnote in fashion history, but as a complex and deeply human drama about the price of perfection and the search for a lasting sanctuary in a fleeting world.